Omega on deck, International Comics Crusaders. Welcome to this brand new show, joined by my homeboy Dave Elliott and the one and only one in the whole world, Mr. Chris Buse.
I certainly hope I'm the only one in the world.
The only one right now, bro. Let me tell you, what you're writing, bro, and everything you're working on. Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff happening.
Professor C.
So what's up?
Good.
All right, muchachos. So we're gonna dig into this one, aren't we? There's a conversation. We're not trying to get mean, folks. It's just a conversation, right? Who did it? Right? Who
It's going to be a very, very polite conversation.
Not opinionated at all.
Hey.
Again, this is just rhetoric.
Hello, guys. Hey, Shomation is there.
Welcome.
Welcome, Shomation. Hello.
And I do want to give a shout out to Legion M because they gave us a goodie that we're going to be giving away today. Shout out to them. Let me go get this goodie. I should have it right next to me. 1 second.
Yeah, we're giving away another book. Or we are giving away a book. We haven't given away a book, have we now? We gave away action figures, but we need to give away a book.
Yeah. We're about comics, so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So check it out, folks. Let me put myself on that real quick over here.
Just put this here on the screen.
Got the Legion M.
Legion M.
Right? Another Legion M bumper sticker. Okay.
So if they want to become an official sponsor, give us a ring.
They got the Legion M pin you'll be getting as well, included in the package. And obviously, the bad boy itself is right here. Celebrating Stan Lee. Sealed. Okay, folks? Brand spanking new for our most engaged user, if you will. Or the best question. Guess we'll gauge it that way. A big thank you to Legion M for their
thank you
doing this. Yes. All right, guys.
We're sending out notifications now. No, excellent. Captain Blood of Kirby has joined us. We're sending out notifications now. Wonderful.
Awesome. Just yes. Sign up. Let them as soon as our posts it. Sign up for a reminder. I did.
Yeah, that's
good. Exactly. Oh, that's why I'm always late, because I never do that. I need to do that. I need to subscribe to the channel.
No, you're just always. That's you, Chris.
That's the one German who's never on time, because you know what, the Germans, they're always on time. I'm never on time.
So you're the exception, Chris. You're the exception, bro.
Yeah, I'm the black sheep.
Yeah. Okay, the only one.
Hi. Oh, Dave Johnson's also here. Thank you. Same to you. Oh, you got the Federation sign.
All right, so what's popping here, man? Look at this. This is great images. And you included someone else here, obviously, in the discussion as well. Mr. Dicko, rest in peace. Legends here, man.
Legends.
Yeah. These are legends, yes.
Right, and as the story goes, huh?
Okay, let's get it going.
Yeah, so I think.
That's Stan.
It's Stan the man.
Let me open this on my screen here too.
Are you supposed to have chest hair though when you go the open shirt route like that?
I think that is also a toupee. I think that's a toupee as well.
Yeah. He should have got that extra one and just stuck it on his chest.
I mean, we will talk about this. We will talk about this in greater detail. And also when we look at these photos. And I wrote an article when Stan passed away. It's on the Comic Crusaders website. I wrote an article. I mean, this is so amazing. This transformation from this insurance selling dude, you will see the guy in a hat in the 50s, to this guy. I mean, the transformation is amazing. It's so astonishing.
Oh yeah.
So there were bosses right there. Look at that.
Yeah. I mean, he got to enjoy his life. I mean, you can say what you want about Stan, but the man was an ambassador for comic books.
Yeah, he was, and there'll never be another ambassador like him ever.
Yeah. Somebody said when we had this discussion going on, somebody said he's the Walt Disney of Marvel Comics, and in a way he was.
Very much, yeah. I mean, when you're promoting yourself and all you're known for is comics, then you're going to promote comics at the same time, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Are we going to show a clip from this 60s talk show I picked up? Because I mean, he did a lot of stuff. I mean, Stan was very active.
Yeah, I was fascinated. I was fascinated by that talk show because it's interesting. Because like that first image we opened with, which was the full head of long hair and the open shirt and everything.
Yeah.
And yet that interview he did, which again was him, interviewing and kind of being half interviewed by a bunch of, shall we say, radical newspapers for the Times, like college newspapers.
Yeah.
He went along, shirt and tie, very, very smart, very proper. It was. I mean, I think it's weird. It's like, Captain. He was Mr. Rogers, but then he literally went like, do you know what? I need to change my image.
Yeah. I think it was this. But I mean, when we go back, I mean, we can show a clip of this. I mean, we have this where we talk a little. Stan tried to do a little talk show in the '60s where we were talking about, and it's on YouTube. It's the Stanley Talk Show. You can look at him, and he's talking. He has a beard, and he looks very respectable. And he's talking to these young people. They're not even radicals. They're just concerned students of the now generation of the '60s, of the late '60s. And he's talking to them with a very earnest voice, and he's trying to understand them. And this is Stan writing Spider-Man at the same time. And I got better understanding listening to him here how he writes Peter Parker. It's quite interesting.
So hold on, guys. I got something.
Elliott is pulling this up.
Of course, you know what I mean. You got to do it in the background. I'm the man of the chair, guys. Yeah. You got to do it. All right. So
I love the fact that he described himself in that interview as he thought he was the establishment.
That is so interesting, isn't it? And then you go to this picture you showed first, Dave. That is so interesting how you see him then. Oh, this is sorry, we have a very bad quality here, but you can still get it.
I've been writing stories for the young generation for the past 30 years. And in the course of that time, well, I would imagine I receive about 200 to 300 fan letters every day, probably as much as the Beatles. I spend most of my time reading the mail and quite a lot of time answering it. During this time, I think I've learned a lot about what young people think.
So young, man.
More importantly, I think I've learned a lot about what young people
are. I'm pretty sure he's got a wig there. And I'm pretty sure he's dyed his beard there.
Yeah, definitely.
Perhaps anything that can be done to bridge this gap, anything that can be done to help present the point of view of these young people without being patronizing, without hostility, with respect, with attention, would be a very beneficial thing.
Yeah.
We think that a voice is needed. Oh, sure, they talk a lot, and they yell a lot, and they demand a lot, but so often nobody really listens to them. We're going to try to present a voice that somebody will listen to. The voice is needed. We hope it will be ours. Today's show will cover subjects that we feel are uppermost in the minds of young people, and in fact, most of the people in the nation. Things such as Vietnam, rebellion, what the young generation really wants. The Kirby rebellion, of course, and that old war horse sex. Our guests today are hip and they're interesting, and we hope you'll find the show the same. Thank you.
Nice, Stan. That's interesting. It's a message from another world, I think. That's early YouTube. It's amazing. That's fantastic. Well, he could have been a YouTuber. He could have been a YouTuber.
No, I think that he had, because I watched the interview in 4, and then I actually watched an interview he did with Roy Thomas, and I think it was that I think he had his own show.
Yeah, look at it. This is the
It was but it was probably public access. That's public access.
Yeah, it was probably on a local station, right? On some local station, or
literally, you can just. There was a time when literally in New York there's public access. It means it doesn't get broadcast outside of New York.
It's local station.
Yeah, you could just you could have turned up at the door, and if there's a slot, if there's no one on, you can just go and sit down and go on air.
Amazing, fantastic. Yeah. I mean, that's so super cool.
Yeah.
And it's the same time. It's the same time he doesn't want to bring Vietnam into the comic books. I mean, this is so interesting. He is very reticent about talking about these themes in his comics.
But I think I watched the whole interview. He's very clearly like he's against Vietnam. He's against the Vietnam War. But I don't think. But where it's very interesting in the interview is where he doesn't agree with it, but I think for some of the wrong reasons, and it's pointed out to him by some of his guests. And I think there's a very much a massive age gap between because he's trying to look young. He's darkened his beard up, but everyone else on there is probably half his age at that time.
Definitely. I mean, he do you have it in your head when he was born? I mean, I have something 20. Is it 20, 18, something 23, something around that time?
Yeah.
When was he born? So he's definitely from a different generation. And we will also talk a little bit about this misconception that he fell into Marvel because he was the nephew of Martin Goodman, which is not true. He was definitely a guy from a different generation, and he's also, let's not forget, he's of Jewish origin, and he's very much trying to fit in. You can always see that with Stan. He always tries to fit in. That is his thing. I love this photo. This is such a very different Stan Lee.
Yeah, that's not the Stan Lee that we're used to seeing.
He's definitely a guy from a different generation, and he's also, let's not forget, he's of Jewish origin, and he's very much trying to fit in. You can always see that with Stan. He always tries to fit in.
Right, but if you watch, hopefully we can post the link to the interview, and it really is worth watching because you actually get to see that he's out of time a little bit. He's in the wrong, he's preaching to the audience of the 60s, but as he describes himself, he's a suburbanite.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, very much so, and he very much comes across it at the end of it by being that, well, actually, I'm older than you, so I know better.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, and it was just like, it's like that's. I think you've just missed your shot there, Stan.
Yeah, but then it's also in keeping with the times, I would say. I mean, he is the establishment in a way. He is.
Oh. But what I love about the interview is he starts off, he wants to be hip. He wants to be just one of these guys, like all these guys who are half his age. He wants to be one with them. And I think that's what he set out to do. He wanted to show that he was as hip as they were and, hey, it's cool. But by the end of it, he's going like, well, you really should listen to the older people.
It's
kind of like, yeah. It's just...
and you see it in those... You see it also in the pictures. I mean, you see when you look at young Stan Lee, he looks older than when he's older. When you see him with his beard, open shirt, and his sunglasses, he looks young. He looks of the 70s. And then you go back to the 50s, he looks like an old guy. The pictures we saw with his wife, Stan is only in his 30s there, 35, 36, and he looks like an old guy. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Man, look at that.
Yeah. I mean, geez.
Yeah, so those photographs, just so that everyone knows, those were from the event where at the Chinese theater where Stan got to put his hands and feet and write his name in the cement it's now. So if you ever go to the Chinese theater and as you're facing the Chinese theater, go over to the top right-hand side, that's where you can see Stan's hands, feet, and yeah.
Wow, man.
Just check something.
Great magazines behind them as well. Damn it. I want these. What the heck?
Yeah. See, that's, you know, and again, that's nothing from Marvel. That's just a personal picture that, you know, he and his wife just, they were clearly, you know, I think we'll see some of the his personal notes to Joan coming up. You know, yeah, he loved her and lived life. At Stan with Bob Kane and I think Jack Davis.
Yeah, that's Jack Davis, I think.
Wow.
It's kind of appropriate. Oh, that's from Chasing Amy. But it's kind of appropriate, like Bob Kane and Stan Lee standing next to each other.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Hey,
if you've never seen what a no prize looks like, that's it. Because you get the envelope and there's nothing inside.
What a brilliant idea! What a brilliant marketing idea!
Yeah.
I have an echo. Can you do something about that? I have a feedback echo.
Oh, that's just a cat.
Okay, very cool. That's also a nice picture of him. Bit reflective here.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Oh, that's wow. Very young. That's when he never went abroad. As an opposite to the other guys like Kirby. Kirby went to Europe for his tour of duty. Stan never left New York. He stayed in New York, and so he could send in scripts to Marvel at that time, and he was doing edits. And there's this wonderful story where one time he couldn't get into the mailbox because the office was closed, and he broke into the office to get the script to edit it. And when his supervisor told him, "Oh, you broke into this," and said, "Yeah, but I want to edit these comic books, and they're good for the troops," they let it go. That's a story Stan told. That's a story Stan told. But the reality also is that Timely lost access to the PXs. Marvel was kicked out of the circulation with the army because they didn't like the stories; they were too dark.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's a very young Stan Lee. Very young Stan Lee.
Not enough Millie the model, obviously.
No, that was later. Yeah, I can see him going for a different kind of career. Fancy that cigarette, Stan?
Yeah, he's typewriter.
Chris is not Chris. He's about to light up in a minute.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'm definitely going to.
All right, now look at it.
Yeah, Mr. Insurance Salesman.
Yeah, that's what he looks like. You never think that he looks.
I mean, it's a long like.
That. Yeah.
Look at that.
See, now that's.
You go from this
kind of,
that, right?
And that's just a few years. That's a few.
Yeah,
that's just a few years.
And that's an amazing transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, last week or 2 weeks ago we talked about Kirby and we talked about the first word. That is Funky Fleshman.
Yeah.
That's the parody of Kirby.
Gotcha. And so wait a minute. So in order for me to be fresh again, I need to dye my beard, folks. That's what you're
Yeah, go for that black. Go for that black look. I'm great today too. I need to shave.
That's it.
So over here, is this him taking someone's page and say, "Put my name on it"?
Yeah, only after I had corrected it 500,000. It's nice that he switches to a grade to pay here. That makes sense.
The toupee. Homie had more wigs than Wendy Williams, bro. What's going on?
Obviously, but I mean, this is the time. I mean, the bald look. You could only rock it if you were a Yul Brynner. I mean, that was a very different time.
See, the shot now is a few years after that, like, because he then started to like. There was that period where he was wearing like the bright shirts and the flares and everything, but
Mr. Jim Shooter, Jim Shooter.
The kid there.
It's actually a very good photo of Jim Shooter. Actually, it's very hard to get a good shooter pic.
But yeah, it's like he does. I mean, he looks like a salesman there. He does, and I think that's. that's where he was best, actually.
Yeah, very
that's
good,
the role.
actually.
Yeah.
It was when those shades landed in his life, he became gangster.
Yeah, that is very 70s. That is very 70s. That is where's my police car?
Yeah. No, because I watched the interview he did with Roy Thomas. He's wearing his sunglasses in the interview.
Jesus.
Whoa. The eyebrows on that hoax, huh?
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, actually, I can almost tell you, I reckon that was about 84, 85. That's what I'm guessing, because I once wore that Hulk costume. I believe it was created to promote the Activision Hulk game at the time.
They were.
And
funny,
yeah, and so I was working for a software company at the time, and they figured that I pulled the short straw. I was the Hulk.
Funny. It could have been worse. You could have been Spider-Woman.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Yo, right, bro? He ain't lying, man.
Yeah.
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 Well, I'm pretty sure, Captain. I'm pretty sure that Stan visited the Playboy Mansion more than once.
I'm sure.
And his lady was cool about it.
So did everybody else. So did everybody else at that time.
Oh, it was the, you know. It was.
I mean, there was a time when that was harmless. That was before the 80s and before the drugs.
Well, I'm sure it was. I'm sure there was. It depends which events you got invited to at the Playboy Mansion.
Yeah, come on, Gloria Steinem went undercover in a Playboy club. Let's see where that went.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool Green Goblin right there, man. That's how they should needed to do it in the movie, or at least William Dafoe without just putting makeup on him.
Yeah. That was a big mistake. That Morphin Power Ranger outfit could have been.
See, but the Spidey
casting
outfit is cool.
The casting was good, though. Casting was good.
Yeah, it was.
And folks, for you youngins here, that's actually a TV, not a monitor. That's just a TV.
I was listening to a podcast about The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, and there's this scene where Kurt Russell records the message on a tape recorder, and the guy said on the podcast, "Okay, our younger viewers don't know what a tape recorder is." Yeah, that's right. That is, you don't know what a tape recorder is. You need to press 2 buttons to record. I remember that.
See, I think most people would say that they're watching popcorn.
Yeah, that is incredible.
Oh, look at that.
So these are there's a few of these. I mean, Stan would write his wife these really love letters, these little notes. I mean, guys,
learn some lessons here. Peep this. My first sight of you was a lifetime ago, but I instantly know that I love you so. You've been queen of them all, the joy of my life, and as I recall, the most wonderful wife. I spent 65 years with the girl I adore, and despite some few tears, I've loved 65 more. So please don't only leave for whatever it's worth, because if you stay with me, I'm the proudest man on earth. He's smooth, Stan. Woo!
but he's not that smooth. Look at here. He's not doing it in his handwriting. And you don't. The tip for you kids out there: don't write a love letter and don't type it. Don't type it. Yeah,
well,
that's
he writes this one. I was gonna say. I wonder. I was tempted on that last one to comment about so he wrote a line at the top and he wrote a line at the bottom, but who wrote the verses in the middle?
Yeah, I had the same thought. Probably asked Roy Thomas.
Yeah, that's it. Rascally Roy, could you do this for me?
Yes, I'm going to edit. And claim all the credit for it.
It was nice though. That's it's the thought, man.
But it is though. I mean, it is. It's really sweet.
What in the heck?
Some kids wearing some Marvel T-shirts.
Yep, that's the Marvel swag right there.
Oh, yeah, man. Shit. That's a Steranko cap, right? Looks.
Yep.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, I
that's
think
very good.
the Foom shirts. I think they're Foom shirts, and I think those were probably mostly all done by Jim Steranko.
Very
Can't
cool.
quite make out who's on the. Oh, it's Captain Marvel.
That's Captain Marvel. Yeah, it took me a moment. That's Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Well, Marvel,
Great.
isn't it? Because that's the one with the
Marvel.
green, white one, right?
It's the original Captain Marvel. Let's put it that way. Great character.
Well, not the original. Not the original. The original
no,
Marvel.
of course not. Yeah, the original Marvel one. You're right. There was also another one in between because that was the third time this trademark popped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
See,
First there was
man,
Shazam.
Yeah, there was another character in between. And there was another character in between. Oh, look at this.
Big Hero 6.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And now,
Yeah, Kirby.
Yep. Kirby.
King.
Yeah, these
I
are.
didn't want to play. He's just the king. That's it, bro.
Yeah.
Man, he looks so broken, bro.
I mean,
You know,
he's just like
there. He reminds me of Ernest Borgnine a bit.
a little bit of Ernest Borgnine and quite a bit of Jimmy Cagney.
Yeah, that's how he viewed himself.
Mm.
He saw himself as Jimmy Cagney.
Yeah.
And there's some other pictures of his where it looks more Cagney.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, that was when they moved to California. Yeah, the king enjoying himself. The king enjoying himself, doing it with the Silver Surfer.
Oh wow,
well,
gangster! Look.
That's Ross Kirby.
Wow.
Yeah, that shot by the pool must have been a rare shot because for the amount of work he produced during the '60s, he kind of spent much time by the pool.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless right there he was acting out something.
Obviously was. That's Jack in the 70s. Look how high the pens are. That's incredible.
Oh yeah,
that is amazing. That was not the style when this picture was taken. I mean, he's doing the old style here. He's doing the old style.
I love the old school movies where the tough guys have their pants, over their belly, and they start rolling up their sleeves. Like, come on, guy. Don't hit below the belt. You're cheating, bro. You got to put it all the way up here. What's wrong with you?
I certainly prefer that to wearing my pants halfway down my legs. So
yeah, that's true.
No.
That is so interesting.
I'm the person in the middle. I want it on my waist. I'm not showing my ass crack, but I need it to support my man boobs,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a very famous picture. I mean, it could have been. It could be Picasso. I mean, he was the Picasso of comics.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh yeah, bro.
That's a great shot.
That needs to be a picture just like that. People ask, "Who is that man?" Then start the conversation. Oh, homie, just chilling. You say, how could he have time to sleep?
I believe this shot's from him at a convention, staying in the hotel room.
Yeah, it looks like a hotel room. That looks very, very impersonal.
No, same gag, same awesome.
Yeah, why not?
That doesn't look like a cigar either. That looks like a blunt. Just saying.
No, that's a pencil.
No,
it's a kids show here.
No, that's the cigar he's drawing with.
Oh, I see. He's drawing with the cigar,
and he's got the pencil in his mouth. Yeah.
That's a joke.
That's what I'm saying,
bro.
How old was he here? Look at him. That's a nice desk too. Shit, I wish I had a desk like that.
Yeah, that's gonna be that's got to be sort of maybe shortly after the war.
Yeah, but many people don't. I think what we had there, if you can go back to that shot, I mean, what we have here, also from his posture, he had a publishing business going on with Joe Simon for a while.
Yeah,
they were doing their own comic books at the time.
they're doing their own comic books and still producing comics for other people as well.
Exactly. So for a while, he was a publisher. Yeah, for a while he was a publisher.
Crime and romance.
But that was.
Yep.
Yeah. They invented the romance genre. I mean, if you don't know this out there, Simon and Kirby invented the romance comic. They did that first. And romance comic books were selling millions of copies a month. Get your head around that.
Do you think that if they brought back romance on that level, it would succeed now because so much slice of life stuff?
No, because we have so much distraction. We have Netflix, we have other stuff. I mean, we have The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. Nobody's reading that many books anymore. That was a different time.
But I think actually, what I will say is, if you, I beg to differ. I mean, if they brought back romance comics like they did, then I don't think that they would do particularly well. But if you look at the success of romance comics in manga,
that's a different story. Yeah, you're right.
So they are there. If you want romance comics, whether it's just regular straight romance, whether it's gay, lesbian, transgender, that manga's got it for you.
So that's a very different market. I was doing research for my book back in the day. I remember this, and I was researching this. They had book adaptations of movies in the 80s. I mean, there was a Halloween 2 book adaptation. I read that a long time ago. Nobody does these anymore. They were done by famous writers, actually. You wrote an adaptation of a movie. That was before VHS became a big thing. And those have gone by the wayside. And so like romance comics in big style, at least in the Western market, I don't see them happening. In Japan, sure. In Japan, you sell a lot of comics. There's this comic book that sold 50 million copies recently in Japan. I mean, the Japanese market is huge for comic books, for mangas.
Yeah. It's a shame because I think that there was a time and a moment when it could have been maybe not as big as manga was, but comics could have been as big. And it was, I think, whether it's not just Wortham. Dr. Wortham was probably a major damage. But there was a whole, that period, if you look at the success, like all those photographs you see of comics on the newsstands during the 30s and 40s, even the early 50s.
Yeah.
It was just wiped out. It was just wiped out.
I had the number there. Was it 2 billion comic books sold in 1952? I mean, this is a crazy number. That was the highest year listed. And it was television that happened. I think it was not only Frederick Wortham, and Frederick Wortham is always portrayed as this evil guy. We should do a podcast about Frederick Wortham because it's really interesting to look into him. I wrote an article about him too. Interesting to look at him. He's a very complex character, and there's also a very good documentary about him. But be that as it may, it was really television, I think, that did comic books in.
Well, I think if you compare America to Japan, like if we're talking to comics to manga, if you look I mean, America is very, very conservative, and yet you look at manga, and it's like Japan could be like, I mean, it couldn't be further the other way, and comics had always been embraced, like reading them on the train openly, not sniffing them, because there was every single topic and genre available. And I think America had that opportunity. Like they were ingrained. It was not just the sale of comics, but it was also, like newspapers. I think the loss of the newspaper strips from newspapers was a very sad day.
Or think about the European. Oh, back with the echo again. Think about the European market. You have the French with the album. The 48-page graphic novel they put out once a year. I mean, they have great artists there. Most people in America have never heard of. And you post stuff like that. You post stuff like that on Twitter and say, "Well, what is this? I've never seen that artist." Yeah, but they are gods in France. They don't look at the American comic books that much. They look at their own comic books. So they do science fiction, they do horror, they all do all erotic stuff, they do all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
That's Kirby with the children.
Yeah, I mean that to me is like that's who I think of when I think of Kirby. When I think of Kirby, I think of not only like with Stan. It's Stan, and he obviously loved Joan very much. But when you look at Jack's photos, yes, he clearly loved Roz equally, but his family is always first and foremost. Because I think the motivation was there.
Yeah.
For Jack, so much of it was, I think, it would have been, I think the 1960s would have been a very different world if Jack was single. If he didn't have a family, he wouldn't have done the output he had. He wouldn't have had the motivation.
Yeah, and also you don't have the time because you have to do the shopping, you have to do the house, you have to take care of a lot of stuff, you have to do your laundry, you don't have 10 hours a day to write. And Roz was a huge supporter. I mean, Marc Evanier will always tell you that she was a great supporter, that she did everything around him. I mean, so did a lot of wives in those days. I mean, I always say Otto Binder wrote 10,000 words a day. I mean, just 10,000 words a day. I know what that feels like. And but he had a great wife around him who did all the stuff, and he could just sit down at the typewriter 10 hours and write, and that every day, including Sundays. And that was Jack. And you can't do this as a single guy.
But I think the difference as well also is that Roz had been very, like, she'd actually even been hands-on at times. She'd inked some of Jack's work. So I think I think she was also someone who Jack could throw an idea at. He could actually talk to about something.
She worked on Challenges of the Unknown. There's credit attributed to her.
Yeah, she inked several stories.
See, that's real support. That's real family to me right there. When, somebody is, there on deck for you, seeing what you're doing and doesn't mind to be in that background and want to help you. You know what I mean? That's amazing, man. And I see that from both of them. They had, spouses in their lives that were just amazing to their craft, and I guess added to it.
But I think Roz Kirby was more involved. I mean, they were clearly more working class, and they stuck more together. You could probably see that. Whereas Stan he had a house on Long Island. He wanted to style himself as this upper middle class guy. That was not Kirby.
No. I love this image here. That's it, Jack. California in the 60s. Something they make me comic conventions out here. Look at that. And boy, is there one. That's awesome.
Yeah, culture shock.
Well, that's a collectible right there that carries. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And look how long the coats... Look how long the coats were in the 40s. I mean, this is always what you see in these old movies, these long coats.
But again, that would have been New York, and New York is cold, and they would have been on the east side, so that would have been cold as fuck.
She had time for the beach. You're supposed to be busy dude, man. What are you doing?
That was probably something like Jersey Beach, or
Long Island, or is it
Long Island?
Coney?
Yep, Coney Island.
The tan really
something like that. Yeah.
Oh man, look at that. That kid was get me out of here.
I mean, the war was a big part of their use. I mean, you can't forget that. You had 3-4 years out of your life. You're in the army.
Well, not only that, Jack brought the war home with him. Like it permeated every story. Like the war, I think it was a constant recurring motif from his work. Everything, like people he met, the major players of the war, always turned up again in his work.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly forgotten. He did a war comic for DC Comics, and he did a war comic for Marvel Comics. He did the Howling Commandos before he did Nick Fury the spy strip. He did the war strip, Howling Commandos. That is a strip he set in the Second World War.
Yeah, And even the
And-
losers, the losers he did
Yeah.
at DC was a great little,
Exactly,
great comic.
exactly. And even then, back then he put a African American character into the team.
Yeah.
That was Kirby from Brooklyn, no
Mhm.
doubt. Now
Mhm.
this tape,
But
where is this now? Does it still exist?
It does. The last I heard of, Dave Johnson has just asked about the drawer. Yeah, that beat up drawing board. That's where Jack Kirby. That's like no fancy drawing board with lots of lights and stuff attached, and no, that's the drawing board, the chair, the little desk by it. That's it. Like if you want to talk about what do you need to draw, if you're a comic artist, and what do you need? There it is. That's all you need. That's all Jack Kirby had, and he had that for years. Like, nice getting a nice like chair. Like I've got this nice rocking chair. No, he didn't need that. He just sat down and drew.
Wow. I would love to have that. Now, that's a collectible. I agree, bro. That needs to be in a museum.
It actually was in a museum for a while. It was. There was Kevin Eastman had opened a museum up in Massachusetts, and for a while you could actually go and see it.
Man, touching that, I'd be like touching that stone right there. You're gonna feel something, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know who has it now. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that the family still had it.
Look what he's working on there. Holy shit.
That's a beautiful painting. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece.
Bro. That's what, just like you said, just in his chair on that beat up drawing board and the drawer on the side, put my paint on top of it and done. Look at it.
Yeah. But that's the thing, you see, it's like all the work he did, and he still found time to experiment with paint. He did personal pieces like that piece. He did. There's that classic piece. The NFL hired him to do some pieces, and he did those as watercolors. Yeah.
These pieces behind him now on the wall.
I mean,
that's the New Gods portfolio. That's the original New Gods portfolio up on the wall there.
And if you look at this man should have been a huge star in the art scene. I mean, that is an artist right there.
Yeah. Yo, Chris, let me ask. For some odd reason, I feel like I may be right here. Do you own a pair of pants that looks like this?
Yeah, stand up, Chris.
I did in the 90s when I wore colors.
Yeah, we need you to stand up, Chris, so we can see we can see your belt just up here, under your nipples.
No, we keep that a secret. I'm like a news anchor now. We keep that to your imagination. No, but in the early 90s, white was the color. Now look at him. Yeah. Look at the woman behind him. What's going on there?
Man. Jack was the gangster, bro. See, that is, for me, again, that is Brooklyn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Brooklyn boy right there. You can just tell. Like, I don't care where I see you in the world. I say, hey, are you from Brooklyn, by the way?
No, that's that look. That's that look that tells you, he looks up and he goes, "You're not a Nazi, are you?" And then he'll get up and just go whack.
Yeah, that's Jack.
At it, bro. Holy shit!
That's interesting. There's some years between. Yeah, well, look at this artwork here. Amazing.
Well, that was the work he was doing at Pacific Comics.
Yeah, that's what's the character called again? I know what that's. I need to see the Silver Bullet. Is that Silver Bullet?
That's Silver Star.
Silver Star, not Silver Bullet. Silver Star. Yeah.
Yep.
So okay, Dave, I saw you tweet out the other day that we need to see Captain Victory come back. I mean, properly. I mean, are you willing to do it? Hold on, guys.
Such a weird book.
Silver Star.
Such a weird book. Yeah, there is Silver Star.
Yep. This was a great book because This particular edition was from Tomorrow's, and it's the Silver Star, all from his pencil. So it's just pencils.
Excellent.
Just pencil.
But guys, but guys, if you want to check this out, it's on the Comixology. You can grab it for it's only $5, $6. You get the whole graphic novel.
Nah, man, I want that.
I'll tell you. Oh, actually, I'll tell you what you won't get for $6.
What's going on here? What's happening here? Oh, excellent.
This is the hardback edition of Silver Surfer by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Still shrink wrapped.
Wow.
Excellent. Excellent.
Are you going to crack that plastic or are you going to leave it like that?
It's never going to be open, man. I've got like I've got the soft pack. I've got the soft backs. So
yeah, Johnson wants to know it. Is that the Topps comic stuff?
No.
That was a different time.
The Topps comic, Dave.
Was Topps, right?
No, Captain Victory was Pacific Comics. The Topps comic stuff was literally
in the 90s, 10 years later.
But it was mostly characters that he'd created, and at different they used different artists, writers and artists on, and just creating new stories based off some old characters of his.
Captain is
they came up with. I mean, these characters came about when the comic boom hit in the early 90s, when everybody wanted to do superheroes again. That's a nice picture.
They look happy side by side, even there, though.
But they're not.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, it's what people telling you. Smile when there's the little birdie. I mean, that's what people tell you.
This was
smile for the pictures.
Yeah, this was Roz was very upset about this picture because, because it was literally like someone had said to Jack, "Hey, come over here. There's someone I want you to see." And here we go. And someone had a camera ready, and so they took this picture. And so, of course, Jack, being Jack, was the gentleman. He just put his arm around Stan. But look at how tightly Stan's got his arm around his shoulder, going like, "Hey, Jack!" And literally, look at Jack. Jack's hand is literally just about touching his shirt.
Yeah, and it's also you see it in his face. He's not enjoying himself.
No. I believe that was taken at the same year that Jack Kirby came to a party of mine.
Oh, excellent! Here you go.
No, I was with Mark Verheiden and Mark Nelson. We were in adjoining rooms in one of the hotels at San Diego Comic-Con. So we had a party on one. I think it was like a Wednesday night, and because no one else was doing anything, and pretty much everyone showed up because at the time there was nothing else to do. And Jack showed up. Frank Miller showed up. Yeah, it was nice.
Excellent. Okay, we have Simon and Kirby again.
Yep.
Yeah. And look at that bow tie. Chris, do you wear bow ties to work?
No, I don't. And this is Joe Simon.
But you should.
Simon. Why?
I don't know. I just think I'd like to see you in a bow tie.
No, I have ties. But guess what color they are? They're all black.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I created the Marvel Universe. Maybe you heard of it.
You know, and that does like. I mean, it's like. I know this is like we're showing lots of photographs of them and.
One doesn't understand the relationship, and who they were as individuals.
Yeah, I mean, we
but it's still to this day. I mean, if you go on any casual YouTube channel or if you go on any interview circuit, they all say, "Oh, Stan Lee created the Marvel Universe. He's Stan Lee. He created the Marvel Universe." And I mean, that's so sad.
He marketed the Marvel Universe.
I think that's what we're going to get into. I think that's what we're going to go into. Is like, because, that's Joe Sinnott.
Yeah.
See, but I love the way he's holding his pipe, like the way he's gripping his pipe.
It's very powerful. Very
what's
powerful.
His name? Oh my God, what's his name? The guy that created the Metal Man. What's his name? Magnus.
Oh, yeah, Doc Magnus.
Oh yeah, Dr. Magnus.
He
Yeah, but that's the time. Yeah, it's the time. That's the time. That's the time.
Yeah, look at it.
Yeah.
Look, that's before it got really beat up.
Yeah, no, that's in California, I think.
It's probably just got some paper on it, which is why it doesn't look so big.
Yeah, exactly. That must be in California, right? I think that's echo again.
But
California.
What a simple room, like, you know, Jack telling it like it is. Dave says over here.
Yeah.
Yo, but this is a simple room for a creator, no? Got a couple of pieces,
Yeah.
doesn't really show off.
Yeah.
If he seems, just by me looking at this room, I'm like, wow, this is a humble dude. Like, he's done a lot. I would be showing that shit off. Like,
See,
wow,
we're so used to.
there.
Well, we're so used to seeing comic creators these days. Like when you see a shot of their studio, they've got a massive, like big sort of 4K TV taking up half the room, and they've got their like boards with laptops screwed to them and iPads and stuff like that for reference and everything. And you know, I think behind sort of basically the point of view, I think it's to the left in that image. What you can't see is the bookshelf. Like Jack had a reference bookshelf, but most of that was novels and
yeah, makes a lot of sense. We're getting to the art part.
there's some pretty pictures.
Oh,
Yeah, that's very famous. That's the first. That's John Romita. That's Mary Jane. That's the first page of Mary Jane.
I think I think this is the last page of the first issue that John Romita drew.
I think
yeah,
so.
well, this though, right? Because I remember my boy 13, because he's a big one, Stacy guy. And he goes, they teased MJ for so long. So this is actually, not that it's her first appearance, but it's the first time we actually finally see her face. Because we kind of always see her in the cameo, right?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely right. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
They used to tease people back in the day, you know, which is fun.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long build up.
Well, they kept, you know, it was always Aunt May wanted to meet her friend's neighbor's daughter, so it was always like, and he was always like, oh, I can't, Aunt, you know, I can't, Aunt May, I can't, I'm busy, I'm out saving the world.
Yeah, that was a good time for Spider-Man. That was
infamous.
Yeah, I mean, that is, the end of the Silver Age.
And then well, that's penciled by Jack, inked by Steve Ditko.
So one of the most
what a great first page. I mean, this tells you everything you need to know. That's such a good story. Essentially.
If he did Amazing Fantasy here, right, with that art by, you know, so over here only Stan and Ditko get credit. Why?
Yeah, because they didn't credit the cover artist.
Okay. See, it was at the very beginning. Like, I mean, one of the things you have to credit Stan for is he was the one who started bringing in all the credits. Like, he was the one who pushed it. Like, everyone then followed. DC followed.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I mean, with EC Comics, you knew who these guys were because EC Comics had these artist pages where they had a full page and they introduced the artists to you. But that was the first step, and Stan had the credits. He was the first. That's absolutely right there.
Yeah, because if you missed the issue where they were introducing the artist, you knew nothing. I mean, if you look, one of the things that DC did do is they had. I can remember with both the Carmen Infantino and Joe Kubert, they would do specials like DC Showcase Special with Joe Kubert, and they'd have a Joe Kubert cover and a couple of Joe, like a Viking Prince story and maybe a Flash story or a Hawkman story. And a big spotlight
Right
on him.
now,
It was
all I'm saying is giving at least Stanley points now. We have a check mark here or something. So points to Stanley for bringing in credits. Okay. But, it's
I think
funny.
we can also. I mean, we can also give him credit. I mean, we give him also. I give him also credit for the most misquoted quote in comic book history: "With great power must come great. With great power must come great responsibility." That is very often misquoted. This quote, and that is when you read the coda to the first Spider-Man issue. That is Stan, and that is very, very powerful. That is
hey, Dave. Hey, I was just going to say, Dave Johnson mentioned he was under the understanding that Kirby created the look, but Lee thought his art wasn't right. The true story is Simon and Kirby were developing a Spider-Man book. They pitched it to Stan. He didn't like it, but all he liked was the name.
Exactly.
And so he took the name, but it's a shame in a way because, the character, in a way, you could say the character wouldn't have existed without Kirby coming up pitching him Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Stan liked the idea, but didn't like the character. He liked the name, and then went on to develop it with Steve Ditko.
Yeah. I actually believe Stan that he had the idea to say I wanted the teenager to be the hero. I believe that.
Oh yeah, but that would have come. I think that was the thing. I think that was the thing. It was like, you see, Simon and Kirby pitched, or Jack pitched the character he created was Joe Simon, Spider-Man, and he drew him as a kind of, basically it was another Captain America looking.
Yeah.
Now, this was before they brought back Captain America, remember? So it was before Captain America came back. So they pitched that character, and he said, like, no, don't. I want.
That's also true.
Yeah,
that's also true. Captain Kirby is also right. There was a Halloween costume that looked very similar to this.
Right, but it was.
So I've seen it.
But I think though, yes, you're probably right. The fact that Stan wanting to have a younger character, not just to be like, let's have a younger character, like, and that goes into also, as you pointed out several times before, Chris, you've got big selling comics at the time were actually Jimmy Olsen, later on, like even Superboy. So wanting to have a younger teen based character was, would probably have been definitely definitely Stan's idea.
We'll also talk a little bit about this, which is very mind-boggling when we come to the few pictures I selected. I mean, this is a great selection. I've only selected a few pictures, but when we talk about the what-if world in which Archie Comics never existed, Marvel Comics never existed, because they both companies were one company. I will tell you a little bit about that one when we get to that. Okay, that's a great cover by Jill Kane. He's such a great cover designer. Great cover designer.
Well, this and the next two images that follow are the three issues of Spider-Man that dealt with drugs.
Without the code, there's no
code. So these are the first three Marvel comics that were without the code. There was no code.
Yeah.
These are gorgeous.
And that was a risk. That was a risk that Martin Goodman let Stan do that. And and the fact that the mayor was very supportive of it as well.
These are
we also
emulate this now.
Yeah. I mean, Marvel Comics was selling great numbers at that time. They're selling 50 million comic copies a year at that time. I mean, that is pretty good, but it was not the main business for Martin Goodman.
No.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting how they stuck to this for the first Avengers movie. I mean, I can say what you want about that movie, but it followed the idea of the first issue of the Avengers pretty closely.
Yeah.
Yeah, damn man, I wish I had that comic. Oh, rare flies to be.
See, it's funny. Like you could like you see that villain that like you. if you can project your head back and you can see like, oh, Spider-Man, the real threat of this villain who's basically got a metal helmet on and who's got metal wings and big toilet suckers on the end of his fingers. But now,
is it 3 dildos or something on the tip of his fingers? What's going on here? Is he going to vibrate Spidey to death?
No, they're literally suckers because he used them to hold on to things. Like he could climb up walls with them.
Oh, when I was a kid, I thought it was the coolest villain ever. I loved the Beetle.
Yeah,
very cool villain.
Yeah, but again, it was a character that
Black Widow, the first appearance of Black Widow.
Yep.
That was what she originally looked like.
That's a gorgeous.
Yeah. I mean, Captain's right. Like, I think. Hey, Captain, I'm not sure if the Human Torch was a big character, or they just thought that they would use him as their hot-headed young. Hey, I'm the kid. I'm the teen.
I think that was what it was. I think that, and also let's not forget they revived the original Torch in the 50s. So the original Torch had a book in the 1950s. Yeah, and it made sense to have this character in Strange Tales. It was only 10 pages, and you could also bring in the Fantastic Four. I mean these stories are atrocious, but nevertheless they tried it for. I think 20 issues.
They the first few stories were Human Torch, and then what they did is they made it the Human Torch and the Thing. So it was the pair of them in. Exactly.
There was a team-up book, an early team-up book of Human Torch.
Yeah, but I mean, I think one of the reasons the stories were quite weak. I think it was Stan's brother Larry Leiber was from some of those.
He wrote those. Yeah, they weren't that good.
Yeah. And I just threw this in because it's John Buscema, inked by Bill Sienkiewicz. I thought it was a great piece, but John Buscema.
That's very early Barry Winsor Smith. You see the Kirby influence still there. You see the house style.
Oh yeah,
but still you still see he's doing
I mean, that was the style that Barry chose because he thought that would get him work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we discussed this early X-Men work. It looked very Kirby.
Yeah, but it's you're trying to get work, so you're looking at what the style is, and when you think that within 2 years his art style had completely changed.
Yeah, definitely.
Another transformation.
What a transformation!
Yeah, guys. Before we move any further, I just want to put you guys on to something cool, right?
Go for it.
Commercial break.
Yeah, man, it's commercial break. Geek Fest Film Fest has allowed us the opportunity to, hang out with a lot of their creators and directors, and we have this, awesome opportunity to, talk about the creations of films and fan films in particular. So make sure to check out the Geek Fest Film Fest YouTube page, so you know what we're talking about, because right now we got 2 episodes of Comic Crusaders and we have more forthcoming. But if you want to know a little bit about the Film Fest, here we go. Just make sure to check out year 8 of the Geek Fest Film Fest. There's a lot of amazing stuff that crosses many different fandoms, from sci-fi to superhero, Star Wars. But I mean, there's one there that's fire. I'm gonna talk to the homie next week. But there's so many other fantastic films. So just make sure to keep a lookout. Geek Fest Film Fest. So right over here we got Captain Blood of Kirby. He used to stare at
Mm.
hours, kid.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew you weren't doing anything illegal at that time because I could get it though.
Oh no, that's it. As that was probably, I mean, my favorite issue of the Silver Surfer is that one. In fact, actually, one of my favorite comics of all time is that one. That's such a
Whoa.
beautifully drawn. It's such a great issue.
I love the Mephisto issue, which was the issue after, I think.
Mm.
I love that look at Thor. We never get that back again.
Mm.
Written and edited by the Toast of Marvel, Stan Lee. Look at that. He pampers himself here. Plotted and drawn by.
Yeah, he was a little bit self-candidizing himself. Yeah,
I mean, it would have been if it was could have gone to co-written.
Yeah.
Or, in fact, actually, if you're more honest with that credit, that should say plotted, co-written, and drawn by Steve Ditko.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, Steve Ditko. I mean, he gave Steve Ditko. That is the only character he conceded. He said Doctor Strange. Steve Ditko created him. He said it multiple times.
Well, I think it was also because he didn't feel. I don't think he felt any affinity to the character.
Exactly. That's, I think, what it is. Exactly. I totally agree with you.
It was. I don't think there was nothing about that character that Stan could sort of make like. He's not a young hip guy. He's a surgeon. And it's dark magic.
Ditko did that purposely, knowing that this is not the type of character Stan liked.
I think he did it like literally. I think Steve Ditko drew it. In fact, the story is he wrote and drew it, did the completed artwork without even telling Stan, and just brought it in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we talked a lot about Kirby, but Ditko is also an artist. I mean, he's on a genius level. I mean, the work he did for Marvel is unparalleled, especially on Doctor Strange. I mean, if you go back, if you're a Doctor Strange fan, you have not read the original Ditko run, you need to read the original Ditko run. I mean, that is Doctor Strange where it's at.
Oh, I mean,
so I think a big fan of Strange.
I think we started this off. I think, look, this was heavily led with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who most people, when most people talk about sort of, which side they're on, who created what, that's really the two main people they talk about. But I think one of the things we want to talk about today, and I think one of the showing images, it's not just Steve Ditko.
No, it's all these guys.
I mean, we're looking on the screen at the moment is Daredevil. Now, while Wally Wood didn't create Daredevil, he did a fantastic run. He made so many improvements and changes to the characters.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. But also the first issue is so different from what came after, because you see the influence of Bill Everett here. I wrote an article about, check it out on comiccrusaders.com.
Yeah.
The influence of Bill Everett is so huge, and so it's that you wrote an article about this too, Dave. I read, and there's the boxing experience of Jack Kirby that goes into this book. I mean, this is such an interesting book. But just talking a brief moment about Steve Ditko. A lot of people talk about Marvel had these stories about that the 3-parters, the 4-parters, they made these huge stories. Steve Ditko had a 13-issue run on Doctor Strange. It was one continued story in the 60s. A 13-issue run on Doctor Strange. It was one story. And there is still to this day, okay, it was only 10 pages because there was a divided book, Strange Tales, but still, 13 pages. Steve Ditko was the first who did this.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I think, it's funny. It was what was weird is when I think let me see. I think somewhere along the way, I think I included. Yeah, later on we'll see the first cover of Strange Tales that's Doctor Strange appeared in. But I think what was interesting is, like it was a Human Torch story was the cover, and the Human Torch, and then the Human Torch Ben Grimm stories were always self-contained. Yeah. So it was at the front of the book. So I think Steve Ditko was kind of allowed to do his thing, because you always got. Oh,
Upsala. We're having some technical problems. Al?
we going now?
Yeah, I think if
Well, you're not closing no more, Dave. Go ahead. You pause for a moment.
yeah. Is
He's
Dave
paused again.
still on pause? Yeah, that's the UK connection.
Yeah, that's what happens in England, man.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. Well, what we have here is art by the wonderful Wellywood. In case you haven't recognized that, that was what Dave was talking about. Wellywood came on for only a couple of issues, and then he had a falling out with Stan Lee, and then he left. I mean, he did amazing work on the Avengers, where he inked Don Heck. If you look at these early Avengers issues, then that Wellywood inked, incredible work, and then he. As Dave said, he brought so much to Daredevil, only a couple of issues. It was Wellywood who made the red costume for Daredevil. He changed the logo. He got very creative with the Billy Club. So that was what Wellywood brought to Daredevil. He intensified the relationship with... What's that?
So Wallywood brought in the weapon.
Well, it was the costume change as well, and the double D.
No, he didn't bring in the weapon. The weapon was there right for the first couple of issues, but it was Wellywood who got very science fiction-y with it. He put the tape recorder in it and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was the 60s. It was a spy gimmick.
Yeah, the camera, the little shooting. The fact it would shoot it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, but just quickly, just going back to Strange Tales for a second, it was interesting that when the Human Torch left Strange Tales and Nick Fury came in, Jim Steranko did the same thing. It now became 2 strips that were ongoing and continued stories.
Exactly, that's absolutely true. It was, in fact, you could make an argument that the first, once he finished the story that Kirby had started, that the whole story was one ongoing thing, except for the last issue.
Yeah,
because it's the Yellow Claw story, and it continues and continues. And to this day, I think there's an issue of Strange, or the whole run, the first one Steranko did. It's very much the blueprint for Die Another Day, the James Bond movie. If you go back to that Bond movie and you read the Steranko Nick Fury strip, it's very, very close to that story. I'm very surprised nobody has ever mentioned that.
What is this page, guys? I'm curious.
Spider-Man.
There is Spider-Man. That's it. That is very interesting work here.
That was the Enforcers.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, you can credit Ditko with bringing Marvel to the street level crime. Because the villains Spider-Man fought were not all costumed villains. They were criminals in New York. There was something I'm sure Ditko brought to the strip. And talking about this is so I thought this so very interesting. You all know who Mike Hammer is, the detective, the Mickey Spillane detective. You all know who Mike Hammer is.
Of course.
Mickey Spillane was hated by every reviewer. Everybody hated his style. He was selling a lot of books, but every reviewer hated him. There was one woman who said he's brilliant. Do you know who that was? Ayn Rand.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting? And she said, I like his black and white worldview.
Yeah.
Here you go.
She would have probably loved Steve's then.
I'm very sure she was aware of Steve Ditko.
Yeah.
She was a very interesting woman.
I get it, man. Doctor Strange is cool, but I'm not the biggest fan, bro. I'm just not.
Oh man, I'd love that. Like I told the only Doctor Strange has been lucky. There's been some kind of some rough periods in his history, but when you consider he had not only Steve Ditko, Gene Colan, Frank Brunner.
Frank Brunner is very good, very important.
Yep. And Gene Colan came back more than once to the title.
And that's what Captain Blood of Kirby also says. I mean, Gene Colan did Daredevil and Doctor Strange, and he did marvelous work on that. I think also, I mean, and a point could be made that Gene Colan was the Bill Sienkiewicz of his time. Look at his art style; it's so innovative. He's so innovative.
Anytime I see Doctor Strange, the Puerto Rican in me just wants to put him in a headlock.
That's the first. There is the first page. There is the first Doctor Strange page ever. The Nightmare story.
Yeah.
Such a good story.
And you know, and you go back. Well, you go back and look at that story, and it was so in keeping with like the creepy big monster stories, the horror stories that they used to run in.
It's very film noir. It's very film noir actually. It's very film noir actually, and it's very well done. It's amazing, and it gives you nothing about Doctor Strange. I mean, you don't get his origin story. You get very little about Doctor Strange here in the story.
Yeah, it was
That's
like
the origin. That came 4 issues later.
Yeah.
We get the origin 4 issues after the fact. We get to learn what happened.
Yep.
Yeah, like with Batman.
Buse. And Kirby's greatest creation, right?
Yep. The fantastic challenges of the unknown.
Very nicely put. Yeah, I totally agree. Colin is one of my favorite artists ever.
And it's I tell you what, with Colin, it's such a shame that like if you, I think there was literally, I think the Tomb of Dracula's inked by Tom Palmer was kind of the height to me, but I still think that there's, if there had been the printing capacity in the 1960s or the late 60s into the 70s to do reproductions from pencils, can you imagine like Dracula being reproduced from Gene Colan's pencils instead of being inked? His work later on was just absolutely stunning. His pencils were fantastic. Yeah.
And if you, I mean, what's so amazing about Gene Colan is he started in the 40s, in the late 40s, early 50s. He's a very quote unquote old artist, and he changed his style so dramatically. It's amazing.
Well, if you go back and if you look at Steve Ditko's very early work and look at Joe Kubert's very early work, the two are almost indistinguishable at that point when they first started out. Very similar.
They're very similar. I totally agree.
Yeah. But yeah, this is the first issue that had Doctor Strange in. Not a thing on the cover, nothing. No little picture, no inserts, nothing.
No.
I think the reason was Stan. Well, I don't think Stan actually thought of it as an ongoing comic strip. I think it literally, like Steve brought it in and he said, "Yeah, we'll use it," and he was literally going to just put it in the back of here, and but thankfully it took off.
Because at that time they also had reprints of older science fiction and horror comics and Strange Tales, so it fit right in there.
Yeah.
See, if this is how you presented the face to me, that now we're talking. That's what I'd rather see than his old ass with the white sides. You know.
Well, that was that.
That's the short-lived masked era. That was only for a couple of issues.
Yeah.
In otherwise astonishing run, because Roy Thomas and Gene Colan, that run they did for 9 issues is one of my favorite comic book runs. It's so dark.
Now this look I love. That's my favorite. Now that I buy into. Oh shit! Classic.
Yeah, and I think I think you know, it's like when it came down to, I think the only thing that Stan really brought to Doctor Strange was his name. And I think that was determined purely by what title, the title of the book it was going in.
Exactly.
Dr.
Jude. They had a similar character before.
Yeah.
Who was actually Asian.
Didn't look like that though in his later incarnations.
That is true.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah. Very famous issue.
Yeah, well, we had the splash page for that earlier on, but yeah.
I mean, this is also. We need to talk about guys like Jerry Conway, the later generation that came on, and this is also very famous. Kirby's original Hulk.
Well, I think I think later on, I mean, what we're talking about is what we're supposed to be talking about is Marvel in the 60s, who created Marvel. But when it came to carrying that torch on further as the titles expanded. Yes, Jerry Conway. Yes, Roy Thomas. Yes, Len Wein. Yes, Marv Wolfman. All had different strengths. All had, because as Marvel expanded, they had horror titles. They had the sword and sorcery titles.
Yeah. So amazing.
See, this piece I love. I mean, it's just, it was just done as a commission. It wasn't a published piece. But yeah, John Cena.
They keep Elliott there. She was so key. When she passed, man, the comics, that shit killed me.
Well, I mean, they were tied to the novels, so I mean, she couldn't stay.
Yeah, but she was an awesome kick-ass female character. Then we get this Red Sonja, that was originally introduced, which I like more. That's not reasonable. A woman's fight half naked like that, seriously.
Actually, yeah, I think, with mentioning Red Sonja, I think we'd be remiss of us to at least sort of mention the fact that Frank Thorne passed away this last week.
Oh my God.
Very sad. Very sad.
Yeah.
I said some of his work, and yeah, man, he was amazing. Rest in peace. Condolences to the family. For real.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I would love. I'd love a collection of his Red Sonja stories.
Oh, yeah.
Are they collected? Are they not? I mean, is there not an artist edition? I think there's an artist edition.
I'm not sure if that's Red Sonja though. Is it Red Sonja?
Oh, yeah, it is Red Sonja. I think it's Dynamite.
It's not his own creator-owned title. Gita.
No, it's Red Sonja. It's Red Sonja. They did four volumes. Okay. I believe it's Dynamite. I might be wrong there, but I think it's Dynamite.
Yeah.
They're even on Comic Search.
Definitely.
Yeah. Captain, that Hulk page we saw earlier was actually, I know you like both Kirby and Ditko. That was both Kirby and Ditko. It was a pencil by Jack Kirby, ink by Steve Ditko.
Yeah, it got a longer run on Hulk actually.
Yeah, but what happened was Steve was inking Jack and then just took over the book.
Oh yeah, makes sense.
Again,
Ooh, look at that.
Yeah,
I mean, there's an old Kirby story that precedes the first issue of Thor, which is about a guy who finds a stick that turns into a hammer. So there is a Kirby creation. There is that Kirby story from the 50s.
Yeah,
and he was not talking about his own stick turning into a hammer, right?
Well, don't forget. I mean, it wasn't the first time that Jack used Thor in comics. It wasn't the first time he's appeared in a couple of times. This was the original cover to the Silver Surfer book I showed you, but this was the first original cover, which was rejected, and they then got Earl Norham to do a painted version of that.
Oh, okay.
Kind of makes actually sense. It actually makes sense, and if you think about the period when it was published.
Yeah, and they were aiming for a bookstore.
Is this area here? Is this always going to be the narrative? Him first and him second?
Well,
I think it's always, you have the writer always first. I think that's how it is everywhere.
I mean, I think really in this instance, and in a lot of the instances where they collaborated, Jack's name should actually have been first. However, traditionally, the writer, because if you look at it, it's a progression. The writer writes the script because you can't draw without a script. However, obviously with Jack, we knew that he was drawing the book before he had a script. But in the whole, it's the progression. So, it's the writer, the artist, the inker, the colorist, the letterer, the colorist. And with Marvel, but with Marvel, most companies would put the editor last if the editor was mentioned at all. But with Marvel, they put the editor first.
Oh, how nice!
Excellent. Very cool.
Yep. profile. Look at this.
Yep.
Right? Getting,
Yeah, that's Archie Comics. Here we go.
Yeah.
They've said it many times. That's Betty and Veronica.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that again, it was. I don't blame them. I mean, it's like, look, it's, you know, if you've got something selling well, why not try and piggyback on its sales, but have something different? So, you know, it was, hey, let's give them Betty and Veronica, but with superpowers.
Yeah.
Who's that Kirby signing his Kirby? The Marvel crew.
That's a very famous one. That's a very famous one. Famous one.
Brand deck.
Too funny, bro.
And I believe that's Stan Lee on the pinboard, isn't it?
Yep.
Again, who drew this? It was
Steve Ditko.
First.
That's Steve.
Art.
Yep.
It's art.
But you see Stan Lee's name is on the page.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, I think I'm trying to remember there's a because I think that was actually a pinup in one issue or one of the annuals. But there was a series of prints done for art as very high-end collectibles a few years ago of classic Marvel covers, and every single one of them was they were limited editions and all signed by Jack Kirby. All signed by Stan Lee, including Wolverine covers and Punisher covers. Characters he had nothing to do with, and so covers on comics that he didn't even edit. Like he wasn't even with the company at the time.
And in case you're wondering who this fetching gentleman is, that is Martin Goodman. That is the man who started Marvel Comics. And there's a story to this. The interesting story is that even though he doesn't look like it, this guy comes from a very poor background. He was a rough and tumbling. That was the time of the Depression. He was he was a bit more or less a guy who liked to fight with his fists. He was not an intellectual, but he was also a smart cookie. And he came to New York City during the Depression, and he met. If you know the history of the United States, there were the Jews who came from Western Europe. They were the educated Jews. He was not that. He was from Eastern Europe. He was one of the poor Jews. But he met a very wealthy young Jew with the name of Louis Silberkleid. Louis Silberkleid was selling advertisements for newspapers. He was helping pulp publishers, and he liked this young guy, this Goodman guy, and they formed a partnership. They put out science fiction pulp magazines. They started several imprints, and then Martin Goodman, or Mo Goodman, as he was born, said, "Oh, I don't need the Silberkleid guy anymore. I can do my own thing." And that was the basis for Timely Comics. He was a pulp publisher, and when comics became popular, he did his own comic books. Louis Silberkleid also jumped on the comic book trend, and he co-founded a company that would become Archie Comics. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? That the guys who would found Archie Comics and Marvel Comics, that were friends, colleagues at one point, how history would have been a bit different if they had started the company together. And
so hold on. Now, see, this is going to tie in to another part of the conversation we're going to have in a minute about, I know something else you're going to be bringing up. So if they had stayed together, would that not have actually meant that Archie Comics might never have existed because he didn't need to start something?
Exactly. It's quite interesting because Archie Comics came about basically because the company that was originally called MLJ, if I'm not mistaken, and it was named after the three founders. And they started with superhero comic books. So these characters, you know, the Hangman, the Shield, these were the original Archie comic book characters.
Sergeant Strong.
Exactly. And in the mid-40s, Archie came in, I think 44 or something around that time. And Archie became so hugely popular when that took off. And Archie also, again, if you go back to the sales lists, Archie Comics, or Archie was in the top 5 selling books into the late 60s. Archie had 5 books in the top 10. There was Betty and Veronica, there was Archie, everything was outselling Marvel at that time, even. So They were really successful. In the long run, Marvel was most successful, as we know this, because Archie today has a market share of under 1%. But if you think about that, what a turn of events. Isn't that incredible? And the other interesting thing is what happened actually was, once Martin Goodman had his publishing company, he started a pulp publisher, he started a comic book business and a paperback publisher. He was the first publisher to publish the first crime novel of Jim Thompson. Jim Thompson had 2 failed novels, and when he turned to crime writing, Martin Goodman was the first publisher to publish his first crime book.
Check that out.
When he was scheduled to be on the Hindenburg, and he nearly died on the Hindenburg, but he got so pissed that he couldn't sit next to his wife, because it's very strange, the story, because there was actually, you could walk around the Hindenburg, there was even a smoker's cabin on the Hindenburg, and but still he was scheduled to take the Hindenburg from, I believe, Paris to New York on that night when the Hindenburg burst into flames. And he didn't go on that ship because he couldn't sit next to his wife. His wife he met on a cruise ship. His wife was the cousin of Stan Lee, and that's the connection.
Yeah.
So he's not related per blood to Stan Lee. His wife, Joan, is the cousin of Stan Lee. And it was her uncle who said, well, basically I have this 17-year-old kid here, my nephew, and he doesn't know what to do with his life. Do we have work for him? He said, sure, he can be my office boy in my comic book business. And that's how Stan Lee came to work at 17 for Joe Simon, who was one of the 2 editors. This is also what people often don't know. Marvel Comics had 2 editors. Joe Simon was editing the superhero line, and there was an editor for the anthropomorphic animals, because they also had funny animals. Can you imagine that? That was also a trend in the 40s. You had these talking ducks and rabbits and what have you not.
Oh, they were huge. I mean, Pogo.
Stuff like that, yeah. That was huge. And then Stan Lee became the office boy for Joe Simon. And that's basically the time when he was also drafted to the army. At the same time, Joe Simon let him write text fillers, because due to the mail classification system, there had to be text fillers in the comic books, so they could keep the mail classification they wanted for subscriptions. And he started with text fillers, and then he started to write superhero comic books.
Well, the text fillers. I was just going to say, the only thing I was going to say is the text fillers were also due to the you had to have a certain amount of text just to get for the postal service to get subscriptions mailed out. Exactly. That was the reason. And sorry, I was just sorry.
Go.
So Stan Lee's first, I think, well, one of his first text stories was a Captain America text story, and it was and Stan was the first person to write in a story where Captain America actually throws his shield.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. I didn't know that. That's great.
I think it was issue 5 of Captain America.
Oh, very, very cool. And he also co-created some superheroes. And that is basically the time when he comes back after the war. Joe Simon has left. And for a while, the other guy edited the books, and then he left too. And then Martin Goodman said, okay, the seat is vacant. Sit there, do the work, and I find a new guy. And he never found another guy. So Stan stayed on as the editor-in-chief and then the art director as well, until Sid Shores got that job. What people also don't know is that Jack Kirby was the art director under Joe Simon. He was the art director of Marvel under Joe Simon. And this is Stan in the early 50s, putting out 50 comic books a month during a time when monster books, horror comics, romance comics were really going places. And the problem was, and this is the interesting. Can we stay with the other picture first before we go to this? Can we go back? The thing was, and this is also what a lot of people don't know, Martin Goodman had started his own distribution business as well, which is Atlas Comics, which a lot of people often misinterpret. It's not a comic book publisher; it was a distribution company, and the name of the distributor was Atlas, and so it was on the comics. And when the bottom fell out of the comic book market, Martin Goodman closed his own distribution business. But he had pissed off a lot of distributors who didn't want to take him on. And he signed up with a new distributor, and they closed after a year. So Martin Goodman was again without distribution. Sounds very 2020, if you ask me. But anyway, eventually there was only one distributor who was willing to take him on. and that was Independent News. There was only a problem. Independent News was the sister company of DC Comics. And they told him you can put out only 16 bi-monthly titles. And that was why we originally had the very limited number of Marvel comic books. It was later, it was 63, it was revised to 11 monthly books. But they were, for a long time, they were tied to a very limited distribution agreement. I think I haven't found anything to support this, but I believe they could put out more books because if you go back to in time, you see really the model and all these romance books. I believe the number was tied to the superhero books because I think they put out Western books as well at that time, but they had a very limited output at that time due to this agreement.
That might have been why they kept titles such as Strange Tales and Tales of Suspense, which were
exactly,
horror monster books. So,
and this is Stan Lee's only friend in the comic book industry. I mean, he talks about this guy for endless and ever. That's Joe Manini. Joe Manini was the top artist Marvel Comics had at the late 50s. And if you go back to all these great Marvel comics, it's not only horror books, you have books about knights, about gunslingers and so on. Joe Manini did a lot of comic books for Marvel, and he was always invited to the house of Stan Lee, and they were very great friends. And the other artists, if you go to the next slide, the other top artists at Marvel, that's a little bit Joe Manini art. That's Joe Manini. There's Joe Manini and Stan in the Hair Club for Men.
Apparently.
And this Fetching Gentleman is probably the most famous African-American artist at that time. That's Matt Baker. And if you think of Matt Baker, you think of Phantom Lady and the notorious cover that was placed into a Selection of the Innocent. Matt Baker created all these gorgeous-looking women, and he was actually ghosted by Jack Kamen, which is very interesting. And he was also ghosted by Al Feldstein. This is so amazing. I mean, this is at that time you had Matt Baker as the star artist, and you had these young artists coming in: Jack Kamen, Frank Frazetta, Al Feldstein, who all worked together with Matt Baker. Matt Baker also worked for Marvel Comics. So these were Marvel's top artists, Joe Manini and Matt Baker. Joe Manini died in a train accident, and Matt Baker died of a heart attack at the end of the 50s. That was exactly the time when Ditko and when they brought, this is Matt Baker again, when they brought Ditko and Kirby back to Marvel. So Ditko and Kirby got the seats of Joe Manini and Matt Baker respectively. What a different world Marvel would have been if you had Joe Manini and Matt Baker creating the Marvel Universe. Would they have created the Marvel Universe? But it's such an amazing, interesting idea.
It's funny because I look at Joe Manini's work, and I can remember even in the very early 70s when I'd see reprints.
Black Knight.
Yeah, Black Knight. But I'd see those Marvel Tale reprints, and you'd have like Spider-Man or the Fantastic Four or something. But then you'd have something like Black Knight as a backup strip, and some of those other stories. And even then, I would look at that artwork going like, "Oh, it looked old. It looked it looked out of place." So I think that I don't think Joe Manini's art, like I looked through a lot of it even today, just double checking it again.
It's very 50s.
Great artist.
Very 50s, yeah.
And in fact, I would look, if you look at the style, very in keeping with John Severin.
Yeah, very good example. Very excellent comparison. For you see art, I mean, I know there's many John Severin fans out there, but John Severin is for me the most conservative EC artist.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's credited as co-creating the Yellow Claw. However, probably one of the most famous Yellow Claw stories is the one that's actually penciled by Jack Kirby and inked by John Severin.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is, I know exactly what story that is. That's a very groundbreaking visuals, which is something that this is not. Yeah, this is not. Okay, we got Jack here repeating a little bit because we selected different pictures. But this is the genius that came to Marvel, because I mean, we all know Jack worked at Marvel in the 40s, but then he went to do his own thing. He was at DC. He got into trouble at DC. And this is Jack. This is a very unknown Jack Kirby image. I really like this. I picked this up today. This is a very, very early Kirby. Well,
Yeah, Simon and Kirby.
Just jumped out of there. What's going on here? Alice is experiencing some technical difficulties.
Apparently.
That happens in a live show. This is live television for you kids here.
It's live TV. I think that cover you just... Yeah, that's the...
Yeah, but also, let's also address what Captain Blood of Kirby said. Martin Goodman is not getting enough credit. I mean, he also brought Mario Puzo to his publishing company.
Yeah,
Mario Puzo, who wrote The Godfather. He worked for he wrote articles for Martin Goodman's magazines.
Oh, how nice. My OneDrive wants to just act up. That's all it is.
Oh,
I see.
Thank God.
That's where it goes.
Reset.
So yeah, let's look here. Dave is showing us something.
No, I was just.
No,
see, I think the. I remember, like, I have my the Art of Simon and Kirby book, studio book from Abrams, and this,
wonderful.
as you can see, how thick this is. This is beautiful. This is all, and this is all scanned from the original artwork.
Oh, fantastic! That's amazing.
So
I mean, there's so much. I mean, this is so incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good book, and it traces everything through the Romance period, crime, takes us all the way, even to the Harveys.
Excellent, super. And we can go to the next picture, and the next. Yes, we can go to the next picture, and this is Mr. Steve Ditko, just in case you didn't know what the guy looked like. And this is so Ditko, think. I mean, this is. There's only a few pictures of Steve Ditko, but this is the most famous Steve Ditko picture. And this is Stan's soapbox, because Stan also liked to disseminate his ideas about the world, as we saw with his talk show. And so he wrote this long-running column. It's quite interesting. Yeah. And this fetching gentleman is the man who drew the best-looking women. If you don't guess it from his face, that is Don Heck. That is Mr. Don Heck.
Dashing Don Heck.
Yeah, very dashing. He was also a heavy drinker, as you can tell from his face. And this is who is this? Who is this? Len McCartney? No, that is Stan. And who's the other guy?
That's
who's
Romita.
The other guy?
That's Romita.
That is John Romita. That is John Romita. Excellent, Dave. That's John Romita in a shirt and a tie.
Whatever you draw, make sure you put my name on it. And Captain.
Yeah, exactly.
Robert Englund for real. Ready.
and look, Stan looks like a lifestyle photographer of the 70s. I mean, doesn't he? I mean, he's the hip guy here. And you have John Romita, is probably 10 years younger than he is. I haven't checked, but he looks older. It's quite interesting.
Photographer for Hefner.
And this is Mr. Bill Everett, in case you didn't know, who was. I gained a lot of respect for Bill Everett in recent time. When I did my article on Daredevil, the first part, I haven't continued yet. But Bill Everett is a raw talent. I mean, he is the richest guy in comics. He came from a very wealthy family. He was very, very wealthy. And still and he was very, very successful he did the other way around. It's so interesting. A lot of artists went into advertising. Neil Adams went into advertising because he had a studio. He did artwork for magazines. Bill Everett started in advertising and said, "Oh, what's going on here? I can do comic books easy." And he did comic books. He created Prince Namor. And it makes total sense because if you go, can you go back a second? What's so interesting about the creation of Namor is Everett came from a very wealthy family. He was very well educated. He knew Coleridge. He knew the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Prince Namor is based on Coleridge's poem. The name Submariner comes from that poem. He took it from that poem. And so it's basically his education. He brought this level of education to comic books, the nobility of the rich, of the prince. That is Bill Everett.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just imagine, just to give you an idea how rich the Everetts were, during the Depression, they bought a mansion just as a summer home.
Oh, damn. During the Depression.
They were really healed. And they had senators in their family, governors in their family. He was the richest guy in comic books, and still he wanted to do comic books.
Well, it's interesting because it also, like, at a very, very tender age of 15, 16, Bill Everett was an alcoholic.
Yeah, and that explains why during the Prohibition time, because that was the Prohibition time, a kid who was, I believe he picked up his first drink when he was 13, how a kid during the Prohibition can be an alcoholic. It's very simple. He was rich. He said, "Here's $5, get me a beer," and they got him a beer.
Yeah,
I mean, this is how it worked.
But it's also interesting, like when you look at Daredevil #1 and the whole background of the boxing.
That's Kirby.
Well, it's Kirby and it's Bill Everett, because if you look, the area of New York they were living in had lots of gyms. That's where a lot of the those boxing gyms were, and so that would have been very much in that area. And
but what's so interesting is the satire that is in the first issue of Daredevil. Once again, if you want to go back to my article, it's on comiccrusaders.com. What's so interesting, if you look at the dynamic between Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson. Foggy Nelson basically says in the first issue, I have no talent, but I have a rich father, and I have a friend who's a good lawyer. Let's start my own company. And this is basically his parody of the rich. That's the parody of the rich. I get somebody who can do the work for me, who is talented, but I have the money from my family. That is Bill Everett. That is the parody of the wealthy upper class. And also you see this soft face of Foggy. That is his view of the rich. And you have these strong working class heroes. There is quite interesting. There's a lot in that first issue. And once Bill Everett is off that book after the first issue, because he was in advertising at that time, it never really rebounds until Bollywood came on the book. The issues in between are not really that good. There is Mr. Gangster. There is Peter Fonda. Oh no, it's John. There's Roy Thomas. That's actually Roy Thomas. There is Roy Thomas with the Peter Fonda glasses.
I wouldn't remind
that is Roy. There is Roy Thomas.
Yeah, he should have. He's the archetype or guy. Like I bet you, like he's what do you call, like I bet you he's a double denim guy. You know what I mean by double denim? He wears the denim jacket, the denim shirt, and the denim trousers.
Which was the prison, which was actually a prison uniform in the 1930s. Strange how that works. Yeah, I'm sure he did. And you had the shoulder patches here. I mean, you had that going in the late 60s. I mean, fashion is unbelievable. But everybody knows someone like Foggy, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, Roy Thomas, give him credit. He was I think he was a better writer than, well, clearly a better writer than Stan was.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and when he was editor-in-chief, I think that's when we saw some of the sort of, you know, like the black and white comics. All the magazines came under his.
Yeah, which is also interesting because if you're going back to Martin Goodman, I mean, Martin Goodman hated those. He didn't want to do those. Yeah. And they did Savage Tales, and that was a 2-year gap. Because Martin Goodman didn't want to do the black and white magazines, but at that time he had already sold Marvel Comics to Perfect Film, and he stayed on for 2 years as the editor-in-chief. And once he was gone, because they didn't prolong his contract and kicked out his son, Roy and Stan could do what they wanted, because Stan moved to the job of Martin Goodman, and Roy became the editor-in-chief. And he fostered all these talents like Don McGregor and all the other guys you remember from the 70s. Steve Gerber and so on. These guys, they all came because Roy Thomas came. Yeah. And we have this. This is really. I mean, if you, it's very hard to say. I really love Marvel in the 60s. I grew up reading Marvel comics of the 60s and the 70s in Germany because they were translated. There was a 10-year delay. But the stuff from the 70s, I mean, the cosmic stuff, the horror stuff, I mean, that is so fantastic. That is really interesting. And at that time, there's no discussion. I mean, you have a writer who writes the script, and you have an artist who draws the script. There's nobody who says, I've never heard Steve Gerber say, oh, no, I created that character. It's always a collaboration. Jerry Conway co-created Man-Thing with Ray Morrow. There was never anything where he said, oh no, I created Man-Thing. It was always shared credit at that time.
Well, I think they always said...
Because it's not just about Lee and Kirby. We talk about Lee and Kirby as being the creators of the Marvel Universe. But hopefully, I think today we prove something. It far surpasses them, when it comes to creators and things that others have contributed. I know that Lee and Kirby are the big names that always pop up, but I think today you've seen a great representation of others that have contributed in a very big way to the creation.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, I think that again, it's when we brought up the subject of who created Marvel. We meant it in that it's in its entirety. It's as an iconic, as a logo, as a company. The fact that it's reached, the way it marketed, the way it did its promotion. We weren't referring to just the actual characters within that universe. And there's no doubt about it that even look, if Joe Manili and Matt Baker hadn't died and they were Stan's main guys, I don't think we'd have had the same Marvel universe at all.
No, definitely not. I mean, there's an article that says, well, basically, Joe Manili could have created the Fantastic Four. I don't see it. I mean, it's very much a Kirby creation.
But it wouldn't. It just wouldn't have happened. And I'm not to say, and it's not just
at the time. Do you think it would have been brought in diversity a lot sooner?
Well, I think what might have happened is they would have brought maybe a couple of other characters into. It wouldn't have been the Fantastic Four. It wouldn't have been Spider-Man. There wouldn't have been the Avengers. There wouldn't have been Thor. However, who's to say that they wouldn't have been able to sort of create some niche for themselves? But I don't think it would have been anywhere near. It wouldn't have been the Marvel Universe. I doubt very much if we'd be talking about it today.
So do we have any work on?
If you want to go to the level that Kirby brought to the creation of the Marvel Universe, I mean, I was referred to Green Arrow, because when he came onto Green Arrow in the 50s with DC Comics, he completely changed the character. I mean, the island was there, sure, but it was, I always said, it was more Speedy's stories than it was Oliver's story. Speedy was on the island first in the original origin story for the 40s. And Kirby said, no, it's not how it works. Green Arrow is the main character. He needs to be on the island. So the TV show we have today, the WB show, it centers very much around the island. That is Kirby's concept. And so when you think about Kirby, he was not just, as we talked, the artist. He brought an understanding of what characters need to be, and that is not Stan. I think Stan was an able scripter, but I think what Stan lacked was characterization. And I think that's something that Kirby brought to the table. And I don't see that in Manili.
Yeah, I think that people, when I hear people criticizing Jack Kirby for like his dialogue or whatever when they look at the New Gods, I think what you're witnessing is like Jack has always evolved, and he's always wanted the characters he's worked on to evolve. And I think that more than any other creator, I think that's why he might have been at odds with Steve Ditko, because probably they never worked long enough together at Marvel to be at odds with each other. But Steve Ditko definitely wanted Peter Parker to stay as a high school student. There was not going to be any sort of graduation with that. And it's clear if you look at everything that Jack Kirby did at DC, and then you think about how that could have all been a part of the Marvel Universe, which could have been very easily, we would have seen a progression of those titles and characters. maybe Thor might have survived. Like if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, yes, they wiped out Asgard. We had Ragnarok, but Thor survived. Who's to say that Thor might have still survived? He might have been the lone survivor of the old Asgard, and we'd have had the new world. We'd had the fourth world. We'd have
definitely
Apocalypse and New Genesis.
Right.
But he was definitely about moving forward and moving on, and it was.
And I think the storytelling genius of Jack Kirby, and I bring this up for a very specific reason. I mean, is if you compare the first issue of the Fantastic Four, I mean, you get introduced to these characters very quickly. You know who they are. Very quickly, the origin story is there. Everything is in the first story, and then we get to the second part, which seems like 2 books. And if you go to the New Gods, and what I really love about the New Gods, and if I want to name one influence on my book I'm working on right now, it is Jack Kirby, because I really love the way Kirby structured the New Gods. You don't know who these characters are. You're 7 issues in, you don't know who these characters are. Only little by little he tells you about these characters. And you discover new pieces about these characters, and slowly it pieces together. And this is how you build a story. Kirby was so far ahead of his time. This is modern storytelling. Yeah. That is not Stan Lee. That is nobody else. That is Jack Kirby.
And remember, I said this in our podcast, but I think, unfortunately, with what we've got from the Fourth World in that sort of 11 issues of New Gods and in the early Mr. Miracles and the Forever Peoples, what we saw was only him laying the groundwork for what the Fourth World was going to be.
Exactly.
And it wasn't it. Yes. It wasn't. Everyone kept saying, like, how's he going to finish it? I'm going like, well, we still haven't seen him fully start it.
Exactly. And what is about finishing? This is comic books. I mean, the Fantastic Four are still ongoing. Who's to say that he wouldn't have told stories of the New Gods in 20 years if it hadn't been cancelled?
Well, but I think, actually, here's the thing, though. I think, if he'd been younger, if he lived longer and he'd started the New Gods earlier on in his life, the way he was, the New Gods wouldn't have changed. If he had the same power at DC to do the New Gods as he did, the New Gods would no longer be the New Gods within 10 years. It was literally, we'd have seen it progress. We'd have seen the world change. We'd seen new characters introduced. I don't think he was one of those guys. He didn't, like, once he'd created these, it was like, yes, he told a certain amount of stories. Like the problem with the Fantastic Four is I love it to bits. Like, amazing run. I wish the New Gods could have had 100 issues.
Absolutely.
But
you
can see at the end. Jack, I think it was a mixture. I think Jack was running out of steam. It was like, okay, we've been doing this for a long time now. I don't think it helped that there was obviously conflict with Stan. So he was kind of like biding time to a certain amount. Like, you could see it in his artwork. He went from 6 panels a page to 4 or 3 panels a page. But I think he was after something new. He wanted something new to do.
I think what also, when we go back to the Matt Baker Manidi comparison, I mean, we talked about this before. Steve Ditko was very, very important. And the same thing with Doctor Strange. We talked about this. Doctor Strange comes on the scene. There is no origin story.
Yeah.
We don't need the origin story for this to enjoy the story. It makes it so interesting. We don't know who Doctor Strange is. The origin story is actually very conventional once that comes in 4 issues later. But Doctor Strange remains a mysterious character. And I believe there's a certain element of Stan Lee in the origin story, but it's also very Steve Ditko. It's this idea, this fall from grace, this rich, smarmy guy who loses the ability to use his hands. It's actually a very powerful redemption story. Yeah. And it's very interesting. And it's also very much Steve Ditko.
Yeah.
And I think these two guys, I mean, Stan Lee was standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, look what he did before. He did monster comic books. He did a very uninspired fare, even with Kirby and Ditko at that time, until he did the superhero books.
So I think, kind of in conclusion, I think really they all like there should never be it shouldn't be Stan Lee Presents at the top of the Marvel Comics. It should be, it shouldn't be any name because because it was, if you did, sure, okay, it's got to be like, Lee, Kirby, Ditko Presents. But
that's the whole cover.
Yeah, but even then, you're still not giving full credit. Like again, Wally Wood went on to create Tower Comics, Dynamo, etc. Well, just think to yourself, just for a second, if Stan hadn't alienated Wally Wood, which kind of spurred, it was his alienation of Wally Wood that actually spurred Steve Ditko to leave, and Kirby nearly left as well.
And he could have had Joe Orlando as well, because Joe Orlando also worked in Daredevil.
Yeah, so think about it. If he'd embraced, if he'd given Wally Wood more credit, if he'd given him the support, and he'd carried on, and what if Dynamo, what if the Thunder Agents were actually ended up part of the Marvel Universe?
What I found so interesting, I saw a very old house ad for the first issue of Swamp Thing, and it didn't say Len Wein's Swamp Thing, it didn't say Bernie Wrightson's Swamp Thing, it said Joe Orlando's Swamp Thing, because he was the brand name. He was editing all the horror books. Kids knew who Joe Orlando was, and that tells you something about how you sell something, because it's on the power of the name, and it's just simply how it works. And it's also, I find it so fascinating when you think about the Doors, when you think about music, the Doors. Oh, it's always Jim Morrison. The most famous songs were not written by Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
They were written by the other band members, but they were not written by Jim Morrison. He was the guy who danced. He was the Stan Lee of the Doors.
The front man.
Yeah. I mean, he was the attractive guy who sold the band.
Yeah. So I think, so it's one of those things where, people will have these conversations for years to come. But again, I think we're, these were fantastic creators. They were all amazing. And even at that period, like when Stan left, when Jack left, and remember, Wally Wood left, Steve Ditko left, then Jack left. What kept it going was that new wave of amazing creators that Roy Thomas brought in. So, yeah.
All right, guys. I want to close the show because I got a meeting, but we still got something to give away. I know you guys been keeping tabs on the chat, for the folks to win this, courtesy of, again, Legion M. Shout out to Legion M. Make sure to check them out.
Yeah, Dave already considered it to Captain Blood of Kirby, as far as I can tell.
Yep.
So, Dave, you really want to? You don't want Stan Lee's book, Dave? Because I know you've been an active participant. Captain Kirby's getting his toy in the mail. You know what I mean? So, actually, I don't care what Dave says, because he's been watching, he's been tuning in weekly, and he has been conversing with us. Dave, please DM me your address so I can send this out to you, because you deserve it as well, okay? Because Captain also won before, so let's do it, kiddo. You're gonna get a Stan Lee book. You're gonna wear a pen when you go to conventions like you Legion M, Legion Mega. I'm playing. Oh, I wish I should have thought about that. Legion Mega.
Yeah.
Where about?
Well, the Mega Legion.
Oh, the Mega Legion. Woo! Actually, the only Legion that matters is the ICC Legion. Woo!
We are part of the Mega Legion.
Yes, we have sworn allegiance. We are getting ink soon.
Awesome. So there you go, Dave. Again, DM me your address to myself or to Chris or to Dave, and I'll make sure they get out this week, because guess what, folks? Here in the States, we're getting our stimmy money. I saw it yesterday on my bank, pending deposit tomorrow. Woohoo!
Excellent, sir.
Well, make sure you support your cops with that, or pay your bills. You know what I mean? Don't go goofing off with that money, folks. Let's be responsible.
I don't think there's not many people that are in a position actually to go goofing off with that money.
Listen, there's some that I see some interesting chats that they already allocated X amount for bills and X amount for fun. I get that we need it, but it still ain't 100, folks. So let's just make sure that we all stay safe because I want you guys back here tuning in, winning another wonderful prize when you have the opportunities too, as we keep getting stuff. Dave, Chris, thanks for your input and your time today. As always, my brothers from another mama and another country.
Thank you. Thank you for watching, guys, and commenting.
Weepa!
Yeah. Weepa! You almost sound like, boy, you almost said that with a Bostonian accent. But with that, folks, make sure to check us out at ComicCrusaders.com and also our podcast family at UndercoverCapes.com. With that, much love. Thank you guys again for tuning in. I'm Mal Mega. You know what? Para que tú sepa, wepa. Hasta la próxima. Much love, mi gente.
Auf Wiedersehen. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed this Comic Crusaders production. For real-time news on all things pop culture, please feel free to follow us on social media. For articles, original content, merchandise, and more, please go to www.comiccrusaders.com. Also follow along with all of the websites of the Comic Crusaders family. As always, if you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the Comic Crusaders YouTube channel.